In the small, rain-soaked town of Aberdeen, Washington, a musical revolution was quietly brewing. It began with Kurt Cobain, a young, artistic soul who found his escape in punk rock and drawing. He was deeply influenced by bands like the Melvins, who lived nearby. Kurt wanted to start his own band. He met Chris Novoselic, a tall, easygoing bassist who shared his love for this loud, aggressive music. After going through a few different drummers and band names, they finally settled on Nirvana. They felt the name suggested something beyond the anger of punk, a kind of freedom from the world. This was the foundation of what would become one of the most important bands in modern history. Their journey wasn't an overnight success. They played in small, grimy clubs and basements, honing their sound. In 1988, they recruited Chad Channing as their drummer. With this lineup, they caught the attention of Sub Pop, a local independent record label in Seattle. Sub Pop was becoming famous for signing bands with a raw, sludgy sound. Nirvana fit right in. They released their first single, a cover of Shocking Blues' Love Buzz, in late 1988. This was followed by their debut album in 1989. The album was recorded for just over $600, a tiny sum even back then. It was a raw, heavy record, full of sludgy riffs and Kurt's powerful screams. Songs like About a Girl on the album showed a different side to Kurt's songwriting. It was a melodic, almost pop-like song hidden amongst the heavier tracks. This hinted at the direction the band would later take. Even so, was not a huge commercial success at first. It sold modestly and helped the band build a cult following, especially in the underground music scene and on college radio. The band toured relentlessly, driving across the country in a small van, often playing to sparse crowds. These early years were tough, but essential. They built the band's character and strengthened the musical bond between Kurt and Chris. The real turning point came when Chad Channing left the band. Kurt and Chris knew they needed a drummer with more power and precision. Buzz Osborne from the Melvins introduced them to Dave Grohl, who was the drummer for a Washington, D.C. hardcore band called Scream. From the first time they played together, the chemistry was undeniable. Dave's explosive, dynamic drumming was the missing piece. With this powerful new lineup, Nirvana signed to a major label, DGC Records. They went into the studio to record their second album. This was the moment everything was about to change, not just for the band, but for the entire music world. As Nirvana was finding its sound in the Pacific Northwest, the music industry was dominated by a completely different aesthetic. This was the era of hair metal, also known as glam metal. Bands like Motley Crue, Poison and Bon Jovi ruled the charts and MTV. Their music was characterized by slick production, catchy guitar solos, and anthemic choruses about partying, fast cars, and romance. The image was just as important as the music. Band members had big teased hair, wore makeup, and dressed in leather, spandex, and animal prints. It was a spectacle of excess and escapism, a perfect soundtrack for the optimistic and consumer-driven culture of the 1980s. These bands were incredibly successful. Albums like Bon Jovi's and Def Leppard's sold millions upon millions of copies. Their music videos were in constant rotation on MTV, turning the musicians into global superstars. The concerts were massive productions with elaborate stage setups, pyrotechnics, and lighting rigs. The sound was polished and radio-friendly, designed for maximum commercial appeal. Lyrically, the songs were often simple and direct. They focused on having a good time and avoiding the more complicated or darker aspects of life. For a while, it seemed like this party would never end. However, by the late 1980s and early 1990s, the formula was starting to feel tired. The scene had become oversaturated with countless bands that looked and sounded the same. The focus on image over substance began to generate a backlash. Critics dismissed the genre as shallow and derivative. More importantly, a segment of the audience was growing weary of the constant positivity and glamour. The music no longer seemed to reflect their reality. The economic optimism of the mid-80s was fading, and a sense of cynicism and disillusionment was setting in for many young people. They were looking for something more authentic and relatable. The final blow came from the music industry itself. Record labels, in their quest for the next big hit, had signed so many hair metal bands that the market was flooded. The quality declined, and audiences grew bored. The once mighty genre was becoming a parody of itself, with bands like Warrant releasing songs like Cherry Pie, which even the band members later admitted was a shallow attempt at a hit. The stage was set for a dramatic shift. The polished, extravagant world of hair metal had become a gilded cage, and the kids were ready to break out. They just needed a new sound to rally behind. When Nirvana's Smells Like Teen Spirit exploded onto the airwaves in late 1991, it sounded like nothing else on mainstream radio. This was grunge, a sound that had been developing in Seattle's underground for years. Grunge music was a hybrid, blending the heavy, sludgy riffs of early heavy metal with the raw energy and DIY ethos of punk rock. It was gritty, loud, and emotionally direct. Unlike the polished production of hair metal, grunge recordings often sounded raw and unrefined. The music featured distorted guitars, often tuned down for a heavier feel, and dynamic shifts from quiet, brooding verses to loud, explosive choruses. This stop-start structure became a hallmark of the genre. The lyrical themes of grunge were a world away from the party anthems of hair metal. Grunge songwriters like Kurt Cobain wrote about feelings of alienation, apathy, social confinement, and frustration. The lyrics were often introspective, cynical, and filled with a sense of irony and dark humor. They tackled difficult subjects like depression, family dysfunction, and disillusionment with societal norms. This resonated deeply with a generation of young people, often labeled Generation X, who felt disconnected from the mainstream culture of the time. The music gave a voice to their anxieties and provided a sense of shared experience. It was music for feeling, not just for partying. Several key songs helped define the grunge sound before it became a global phenomenon. Soundgarden's Black Hole Sun is a perfect example. With its psychedelic, dark atmosphere and powerful vocals, Alice in Chains brought a much heavier, more metallic edge to grunge, with songs like Man in the Box exploring themes of censorship and despair through haunting vocal harmonies. Pearl Jam's Alive, an epic and emotional anthem, told a complex story of family secrets and survival. These songs showcased the diversity within the genre, but they all shared a common thread of emotional intensity and a rejection of the superficiality that had dominated popular music. The visual style of grunge was as important as the sound. It was, in essence, an anti-style. Instead of leather and spandex, musicians and fans wore everyday, practical clothing suitable for the cold, damp weather of the Pacific Northwest. This included ripped jeans, flannel shirts, Doc Martens boots, and old jumpers. The look was unintentional at first. It was simply what people wore, but it quickly became a uniform for a generation, a visual rejection of the glamour and artifice of the 1980s. It was about being real and unpretentious. This authenticity was the core of grunge's appeal, and the primary reason it connected so powerfully with so many people. While Nirvana became the band that took grunge to the masses, they were by no means the first. The foundations of the Seattle sound were laid years earlier by a handful of pioneering bands. These groups were the true originators, mixing punk, metal, and garage rock into something new and potent. The U-Men, formed in 1981, were one of the earliest examples. Their chaotic, arty punk sound was a major influence on many of the bands that followed. They were unpredictable and experimental, setting a precedent for the nonconformist attitude that would define the Seattle scene. They never achieved mainstream success, but their impact on the local musicians was immense. The most important pioneers were arguably the Melvins. Formed in Aberdeen, Washington, the same hometown as Kurt Cobain, Their slow, heavy sludge metal sound was a direct blueprint for grunge. Kurt was a huge fan, a roadie for them, and even auditioned to be their bassist at one point. The influence of the Melvins' heavy, down-tuned riffs and unconventional song structures can be heard all over Nirvana's early work, especially on the album. Bands like Green River, which featured future members of Pearl Jam and Mudhoney, were also crucial. They were one of the first bands to be labeled grunge, and their 1986 EP is considered a foundational text of the genre. Another key band in this early movement was Soundgarden. Formed in 1984, they were one of the big four of Seattle grunge, alongside Nirvana, Pearl Jam, and Alice in Chains. However, they were releasing music long before the others broke through. Their early EPs on the Sub Pop label, like from 1987, helped to define the regional sound. Chris Cornell's incredible vocal range and the band's heavy, Zeppelin-influenced riffs made them stand out. They were one of the first Seattle bands to sign to a major label, paving the way for the wave of signings that would happen in the early 1990s. They were veterans of the scene by the time Nirvana released. So when Nirvana arrived, they were not inventing a new genre from scratch. They were building upon a rich, established local scene. Their genius was in taking these existing elements, the heaviness of the Melvins, the punk energy of the U-Men, the melodic sensibilities of bands like the Wipers, and synthesizing them with Kurt Cobain's incredible gift for pop melody. Nirvana didn't invent grunge, but they perfected it. They wrote the song "Smells Like Teen Spirit" that was catchy enough to get on the radio, but authentic enough to represent the entire movement. They were the right band at the right time, the perfect vehicle to carry this underground sound to the entire world. So Nirvana's sound was defined not by expensive, high-end equipment, but by this practical and often, well, chaotic collection of second-hand gear. Kurt Cobain was famous for his use of Fender guitars, but interestingly, not the popular Stratocasters or Telecasters. He actually preferred the less fashionable pawnshop models like the Jaguar and the Mustang. He just loved their slightly smaller scale and unique sound. And, he famously combined the two to create a custom model called the Jag-Stang. These guitars were often modified and, honestly, subjected to some intense abuse on stage, frequently being smashed at the end of a show. But this wasn't about destroying expensive instruments. It was a punk rock statement, a final burst of chaotic energy. For amplification, Kurt's setup was a key part of his signature sound. He favored a combination of a Mesa Boogie preamp and Crown power amps, driving multiple speaker cabinets. However, he was also known to use Randall's solid-state amps, particularly in the early days. The crucial element of his guitar tone was, without a doubt, his effects pedals. His most recognizable sound came from the Electro-Harmonix small clone chorus pedal, which created that watery guitar sound you hear on the verses of "Smells Like Teen Spirit" and "Come As You Are." For distortion, he relied heavily on a Boss DS1 and later a DS2 turbo distortion to create his loud, aggressive and fuzzy tone. Chris Novoselic on bass was the band's solid melodic anchor. His bass lines were never overly complicated, but they were always powerful and perfectly complemented the guitars. He primarily used Gibson Ripper and RD Artist basses in the early days, later favoring basses made by Ibanez. His sound was typically run through an Ampeg SVT amplifier, a classic choice for rock bassists, known for its powerful room-filling low end. Like Kurt, Chris's approach was about power and feel, rather than technical complexity. His steady, driving bass lines provided the solid foundation upon which Kurt's chaotic guitar work and vocals could rest. And then there's Dave Grohl. His drumming was the engine that drove Nirvana's most famous work. His style was a combination of punk rock energy and hard rock power. He hit the drums incredibly hard, a style he developed playing in hardcore bands. He used a Tama drum kit for much of his time in Nirvana, with large-sized toms and cymbals, which really contributed to his massive sound. He didn't use a lot of intricate fills or complex patterns. Instead, he focused on powerful, propulsive beats that perfectly matched the dynamic shifts in the music. His explosive drumming on songs like Smells Like Teen Spirit was just as revolutionary as Kurt's guitar playing and songwriting. When the grunge wave hit, the music industry changed almost overnight. The hair metal bands that had been ruling the charts just months earlier suddenly looked and sounded completely out of date. Record labels, always chasing the next trend, began dropping their glam metal acts and scrambling to sign bands that sounded like Nirvana. MTV, which had been instrumental in building the careers of bands like Poison and Motley Crue, shifted its focus entirely to the new Seattle sound. The flamboyant, party-centric aesthetic of hair metal was now seen as cheesy and honestly a bit embarrassing. For these bands, it was a moment of profound crisis. They had to decide whether to adapt or risk becoming extinct. Some bands tried to change their image and sound to fit the new musical landscape. Motley Crue, one of the biggest bands of the 1980s, is a prime example. In 1994, they released a self-titled album with a new singer, John Corabi. The album abandoned their party rock anthems for a darker, heavier and more alternative sound. The band cut their hair and traded their spandex for a more stripped-down look. While the album was praised by some critics for its musical depth, it was a commercial failure. The band's old fans were confused by the new direction, and grunge fans were not interested in a band they still saw as a symbol of 80s excess. Other bands, like Bon Jovi, also attempted to navigate the changing tides. On their 1992 album, Keep the Faith, they adopted a more mature look and a sound that incorporated more serious, socially conscious lyrics. While they were more successful in retaining their audience than Motley Crue, it was clear that their era of total chart domination was over. Even bands like Def Leppard, who released the album Slang in 1996, experimented with a rawer, darker, and more alternative sound. This album also alienated some of their longtime fans and failed to capture a new grunge audience. The attempts to adapt often felt forced and inauthentic. Ultimately, trying to play grunge was a losing game for the hair metal bands. The very essence of grunge was authenticity and a rejection of commercialism. When established, multi-million selling rock stars tried to adopt the style, it came across as a cynical marketing move rather than genuine artistic expression. The public could see through it. The bands who had built their identities on glamour and spectacle could not convincingly transform into flannel-wearing purveyors of angst. The shift in public taste was so swift and so total that for most of these bands, there was no way to successfully bridge the gap between the two worlds. The reign of grunge as the dominant force in popular music was intense, but honestly, relatively short-lived. The movement's peak lasted from roughly 1992 to 1995. The tragic death of Kurt Cobain in April 1994 is often cited as the symbolic end of the era. With its most iconic and reluctant spokesperson gone, the movement seemed to lose its heart. The intense media focus and commercialization of the genre had also taken its toll. What began as a rebellious underground scene had become a mainstream marketing category, and many of the bands and fans began to feel that its original spirit had been lost. The music world was ready for something new. In the United Kingdom, a different kind of rock music was emerging. Britpop, led by bands like Oasis and Blur, offered a stark contrast to the angst and introspection of grunge. Their music was more optimistic, melodic, and drew heavily from 1960s British rock bands like the Beatles and the Kinks. Songs like Oasis's Wonderwall and Blur's Parklife were celebratory and swaggering. The bands sang about British life with a sense of pride and wit. This provided a welcome relief from the perceived gloom of American grunge. By the mid-1990s, Britpop had become a massive cultural phenomenon in the UK and had a significant impact internationally. In the United States, the void left by grunge was filled by a variety of different styles. One of the most prominent was pop-punk. Bands like Green Day and The Offspring, who had their roots in the same punk scene as Nirvana, broke through to the mainstream. Their music was energetic, catchy, and less serious than grunge. Green Day's 1994 album Dookie was a massive success, with its fast-paced melodic punk anthems about boredom and youthful rebellion. This style of music offered the energy of rock without the heavy emotional weight of grunge, and it proved to be incredibly popular with a younger audience. Another significant trend that emerged in the post-grunge landscape was the rise of alternative rock bands with a more diverse sound. Artists like Beck, with his eclectic mix of hip-hop, folk and rock, and bands like the Smashing Pumpkins, with their grand, ambitious art rock sound, showed that there were many new directions for rock music to go. The end of grunge did not mean the end of alternative music. It simply opened the door for a wider range of styles to gain mainstream attention. The revolution that Nirvana had started had fractured into a dozen new possibilities, permanently changing the landscape of popular music. After spending most of the 1990s in the cultural wilderness, hair metal began to experience a surprising revival in the new millennium. The passage of time had allowed a new generation to discover the music without the baggage of the grunge backlash. What once seemed dated and embarrassing now felt fun and nostalgic. The 1980s became a popular decade for retro culture, and hair metal was a huge part of that. People started to appreciate the music for what it was, well-crafted, energetic rock and roll designed for a good time. The irony and cynicism of the 90s had faded, and there was room again for a bit of glamour and excess. Many of the original hair metal bands reunited and began touring again, finding large and enthusiastic audiences. Bands like Mötley Crüe, Poison and Def Leppard launched hugely successful reunion tours, playing their classic hits to packed arenas. These tours were not just for the original fans. They attracted younger people who were discovering the music for the first time. The bands embraced their legacy, putting on the same kind of spectacular, high-energy shows that had made them famous in the first place. They proved that there was still a significant demand for their brand of rock and roll entertainment. The revival wasn't just about nostalgia tours. Some bands began to release new music that was well received. In 2008, Mötley Crüe released Saints of Los Angeles, an album that returned to their classic sound and was met with positive reviews and strong sales. Def Leppard has continued to release new albums consistently, maintaining a loyal fan base. Moreover, a new wave of bands emerged that were heavily influenced by the 80s hair metal sound. Bands from Scandinavia in particular, such as Hardcore Superstar and Crash Diet, have built careers on a modern interpretation of the glam metal style, complete with the look and attitude. A key example of the genre's new life is the band Steel Panther. Starting as a comedy covers band on the Sunset Strip, they perfectly parodied the excesses of 80s hair metal. However, their original songs, like Death to All But Metal, became incredibly popular. While their lyrics are satirical, their musical talent is serious. They write catchy, anthemic songs that are a loving tribute to the genre they are simultaneously mocking. Their success shows how hair metal has found a new place in the culture. It can be enjoyed sincerely as great rock music, or with a sense of irony and fun, acknowledging its over-the-top nature. The spandex and hairspray had returned, finding a permanent, if smaller, place in the rock world. The impact of Nirvana on the course of music history cannot be overstated. They were the catalyst for one of the most dramatic cultural shifts of the 20th century. With the release of Nevermind, they effectively ended the decade-long dominance of hair metal and ushered in a new era of alternative rock. They proved that music that was raw, honest, and emotionally complex could be commercially successful on a massive scale. They tore down the wall between the underground and the mainstream, opening the floodgates for a host of other alternative artists to find an audience. The music industry was permanently altered. Their influence extended far beyond just the music. Nirvana changed what it meant to be a rock star. Kurt Cobain was the antithesis of the swaggering, hedonistic frontmen of the 1980s. He was introverted, sensitive, and openly conflicted about fame. This created a new archetype, the reluctant superstar. His authenticity and vulnerability resonated with millions of fans who felt alienated by the manufactured perfection of pop culture. The fashion of the era also shifted dramatically. The glamorous, polished look of hair metal was replaced by the simple, unpretentious style of flannel shirts, ripped jeans, and old jumpers, a look that still echoes in fashion today. Even after the grunge movement faded, Nirvana's legacy continued to shape the music that followed. They reminded the industry that audiences were hungry for something real, and that hits could come from the most unexpected places. This paved the way for the diversity of the late 1990s, from the pop-punk of Green Day to the art rock of Radiohead. Many artists from different genres have cited Nirvana as a major influence, inspired by their songwriting, their powerful dynamics, and their uncompromising artistic vision. The idea of alternative music becoming the mainstream standard is a direct result of the path that Nirvana forged. Today, more than 3 decades after they first broke through, Nirvana's music remains as powerful and relevant as ever. Their songs are still played on the radio, and new generations of listeners continue to discover their work. They represent a pivotal moment when music felt truly revolutionary, when 3 young men from a small town in Washington could change the world with a few distorted chords and a powerful scream. Nirvana didn't just kill hair metal, they gave a voice to a generation, and, in doing so, reset the entire trajectory of popular culture, leaving an indelible mark that will never be erased.